Welcome back, webheads, to the next episode of the Spidey Swing-Bys podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley of Systematic Geekology, as we continue on through every appearance of Spider-Man in chronological order so far as release order is concerned. So today, we're going to be in Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4 and Strange Tales Annual number 2. So as you can tell, we've got a lot to get through, so let's start with Amazing Spider-Man 3. We get an amazing cover with Doctor Octopus isn't revealed completely, but we see him in shadow telling him that Spider-Man that he's completely helpless, and he warned him that the power of Doctor Octopus is far greater than yours, and Spider-Man has been grabbed by the mechanical tentacles of Doctor Octopus and seemingly can't get out. You also see the Human Torch in this issue. So we see a bunch of people look like they're doing a robbery. Spider-Man uses the spider signal for the first time to mess with them. He takes them out completely and webs them up, and then leaves them up for the police to take here, leaving a symbol there. We then go to the U.S. Atomic Research Center, where Dr. Octopus is there. He is called Dr. Octopus before he becomes the criminal mastermind known as Dr. Octopus because of the mechanical arms that he uses, the tentacles there that will grab onto things, where he can do it in a safe environment to prevent himself from facing the effects of radiation. Because, even as less knowledgeable as people were back in the day, they did know, hey, shouldn't be wrestling with some of this stuff. Unfortunately, as eventually people like Marie Curie learned that you just can't really handle radium around on your person all the time because radioactivity is bad for the human body. So there's an explosion, and he is bonded to his mechanical arms. As a result of this, they tell him, hey, just stay in bed and get some rest. But as part of him being damaged by the radiation, he views their care as a threat and decides that he's going to do something about this, and he's stronger than any of them, and he flees from there with his mechanical arms, which are able to rip off the bars that look like they're there for prisoners, and he then goes off to become the villainous Dr. Octopus. Then we see Peter Parker going to the Daily Bugle, who is J. Jonah Jameson is asking him to find pictures of Dr. Octopus. People can't get inside there. And Peter says, I'll get them for you. I'll get those pics, P-I-X, for you. And Jonah's like, how in the world are you going to do this? And Peter reminds himself in his inner dialogue how he's never going to reveal that to him. So he goes off to go grab the pictures of Dr. Octopus, webs up as Spider-Man, ends up inside, and he sees these tentacle comes out of the window, and Dr. Octopus is threatening everyone there who formerly were people he worked with or nursing staff as well, the place he was going to recover, and he's going to change things there. He threatens the big guy whose name escapes me right now, who is kind of like his boss, as it were. So Spider-Man comes in to try and save him, and has some jokes and japes with Dr. Octopus, but being young and experienced, he gets hit by the metal arms multiple times over. He webs them up for a bit, but Dr. Octopus is able to snap them out. And of course, one of the greatest gaffes of all time in early Marvel, as Dr. Octopus is yelling at Spider-Man, and now Superman, I grow bored with this game. My time is too valuable. I forgot to talk about the editors and stuff. That was me trying to get into things. You know what? Screw it. We'll do it live. Because I was about to make a joke about the editors, and that would make more sense if I accredited them. So Amazing Spider-Man 3, release date April 9th, 1963. Story 1, Spider-Man versus Dr. Octopus, written by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Oh, sorry, this is only story. Penciled by Steve Ditko, inked by Steve Ditko, lettered by John Duffy, and edited by Stan Lee. So I know we're off to a bad start, but let's keep going. So what else happened in Marvel this month? Well, you may be wondering, because I forgot to do it earlier. So in Journey into Mystery 93, we see the mighty Thor facing off against the communist menace of the radioactive man, a character who will last for many years in Marvel. Then it sometimes it's kind of stale. Tales to Astonish 45. After last issue, where the Wasp, which we didn't cover because there wasn't a Spider-Man book that month, becoming the Wasp in last issue in 44, Janet joins Hank Pym as they fight against a returning Egghead. Then in Fantastic Four 16, Ant-Man also becomes, one of the crossover boys by joining the Fantastic Four against Doctor Doom in the realm of Subatomica in a very fun story. We get Strange Tales 110, where for Strange Tales is okay. The Human Torch fighting against the terrible duo of the Wizard and Paste Pot Pete, later to become known as the Trapster. Then Tales of Suspense 43. Iron Man must defeat Kala, Queen of the Netherworld, as she invades the world and needlessly complicates the origin of Atlantis in the Marvel Universe. You got to read it to believe it. So, actually, going into the issue proper, which is how I should have. Getting out the kinks right here now. This is why. Oh yeah, by the way, I don't have an editor, so this is staying in. Whatever you see is what you hear is what you get. So after calling him Superman, Doctor Octopus manages to manhandle Spider-Man, even smacks him in the face, telling him, you dared to mock me before, but why aren't you mocking me now? Where are your brave words and taunts now, Spider-Man, calling him correctly, and flings him out of the facility they're in. And Peter's like, wow, what do I do? I've never been beaten before. But his spider powers weren't enough. Like, is this the end of Spider-Man? In a very, very childish teenage way. But you know what? It works because that's who he is at his time. Doc Ock then goes back to his place of employment to restart his work. And as a result of the brain injury he suffered and the radiation he got hit by, he's going to try and do things in a very unethical way, because he's just convinced that this is what he's got to do. We didn't go over to see Peter Parker back at home, kind of moping, and Aunt May comes in wondering why Peter's been at this for hours. And he tells Jameson over the phone, sorry, you won't be able to get the pictures. And Aunt May asks him why everything's going wrong. And instead of like bringing up anything, Peter's like, no, it's my own personal problem. And this is a very Peter thing, especially early on, even to now to a certain extent. He keeps a lot of things close to the vest. And as a result, it makes him seem aloof or someone who doesn't care. And this is one of the huge problems of his character at certain points in time, depending on the writing, is when he doesn't, feel like sharing with people and opening up to them and being seen as this loner and outcast. It becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as he's there, we see Flash and Liz and Sally talking about how the governor's asked the Fantastic Four to capture Doctor Octopus, and the Human Torch is actually going to be speaking to their class in an assembly that day. And we see Johnny give a speech in a very Johnny way, very proud and pompous, but to an extent, how like he's kind of not at his full potential at that moment in time because he's a little tired, but he shows how, like, hey, when he goes to the wrong person, like, if he asks Ben Grimm for help with his math, which is completely wrong because Ben's actually a genius to a certain extent, he gets 2 and 2 equals 3. But he gives some more demonstrations, he says, stick to your schoolwork and do your best in your studies. Don't be discouraged if it sometimes seems tough. The important thing is never give up. Remember that. Never give up. And Peter's like, man, it's almost like he's talking to me. And like, obviously they don't know each other's secret. Well, one of them has a secret identity. They don't know each other at this point in time personally as well. And Peter asks him, or he tells him after the speech, he wants to say thank you. He'll never forget what he said. It meant a lot to him. And Johnny, being completely oblivious, goes, yeah, okay, just one other guy. And Peter then goes back, suits up as Spider-Man, thinks about, in the past, Fantastic Four haven't always won. So if it happens to Spider-Man, it can happen to anyone. So let me get back into the fight. He goes into the atomic research facility, and Dr. Octopus sees him coming. He tries to attack him remotely. Spider-Man's spider sense alerts him to the issues, and he's able to get out of the way of most of them, ends up in the chemical lab and makes up something that he will use to take down Dr. Octopus, kind of as fail-safe. And they then attack one another. Peter is then able to use some of the compounds he made. I'm sure there's a better scientific term. I'm not a chemist. To fuse the metal of Dr. Octopus's arms together. But even with that, Dr. Octopus says, well, you may have fused them together, but they can still be used as weapons. And he catches him with the other two that aren't fused. And Spider-Man then webs up his head which makes him bring Spider-Man closer to him, kind of reflexively with the tentacles, and they're in a full punching match. And of course, Doctor Octopus is just some dude, as we will later see forever from now. When he takes over Spider-Man's body and the superior Spider-Man stuff, it's like he got beaten up a lot, and that did a number on a regular guy's head. And this is the start of that. So Spider-Man has knocked him out because, once again, he's still just a guy. And the army comes in. They see the spider signal there, and Dr. Octopus webbed up. He's left a note for him, and Spider-Man is able to get away. And then he goes off because he's still using spider sense to track down people, which is something that will thankfully get taken away later on. Is Johnny is now healthy. He's flames on as a Human Torch, but Spider-Man has come there and says, "Hey, I already captured Dr. Octopus." And he tells him it's thanks to you. And he also tells him that if it wasn't for you, Spider-Man would have been finished too. And Johnny is having no context for any of this because, what? Huh? And Spider-Man even calls him a pal and webs away. And we get a classic, early 60s line, flaming fireballs. I don't get it. What did I do? As he's literally scratching his head. And he leaves, and we see the rest of Peter's class watching a Human Torch go, and Flash is making fun of him. Like, hey, his idea of a hero is someone like the Human Torch and Spider-Man, but a real man isn't like you little bookworm. And Peter kind of gets that little smug look almost doesn't look at the audience, at where we see him kind of go, yeah, someday I'll tell you why, loudmouth, and I'm sure going to enjoy it. Yes, sir. It's going to be a real pleasure. And if only that had been handled well when we actually learn later things on in the Marvel Universe, but whatever. We also get a little bonus page here of Spider-Man, and that is it for the 3rd issue of Amazing Spider-Man. So, with all that in mind, what do we think about this issue? Well, let's start with Dr. Octopus as villain. If you want to talk about, personally, out of ranking every Spider-Man villain, Otto Octavius is my number 2. He's get beaten by the Green Goblin for reasons that'll be made apparent way later on from here. But he's an awesome villain for Spider-Man. It says, yes, as noted, he's not a physical threat too much outside of the mechanical arms and everything that they can do, but he's an intellectual threat. In addition to having these mechanical tentacles that can operate almost independently at times and have massive strength behind him and get him to where he couldn't normally go. But he's got the mind to back it up, much in the same way that Spider-Man's webbing allows him to access things in ways that he wouldn't normally be able to. And he's got the super strength, but also the intellect. So they're not a complete one-to-one to each other, but there's enough there to where you get why Dr. Octopus is one of, if not the first returning villain for Spider-Man to go after. How similar they are, but also how different they are, and how that clash works is why Otto became a villain, why Peter became a hero, and both of them affected by radiation. Because, once again, remember where we're at. We are in the 60s, and radiation is king. Radiation can do anything. It's like lightning back in the day. Lightning can bring Frankenstein's monster to life. Radiation can give Peter Parker superpowers. It's just how it is. So, yeah, really enjoying it there. They have a great fight with each other. Like, Peter facing defeat is huge because you need your hero to face adversity. And Peter's still young. And we're going to stress that a lot because this is a period of his life where he's young, to the point where too many people bring it back here, and too many adaptations of Spider-Man leave him in high school rather than building him up and showing that he has places to go after this, grow up as a person rather than remaining static. But that's its own thing. But they're such good foils for one another. And the fact that we're going to see years from now, even after everything they've gone through, there's a respect, but there's also a hatred between the two of them that works extremely well. And it's all built up of something like this. I'll try to say supporting cast, nothing too big here. The Human Torch is really, honestly, a forgotten member of Spider-Man's supporting cast in many respects, because especially early on, he shows up not every other issue, but enough to where he's practically part of the cast. And it makes enough sense because he and Peter are around the same age, both hot-headed idiots. One goes a little too into showboatiness, the other into making fun of other people and being a bit of a jerk about it. And it just works together. And that's why, like later on in this episode, we're going to see them teaming up. It was a natural thing that needed to be done. And it started in issue number 1. It's built up here in issue number 3. And then when we get to Strange Tales Annual 2, it makes sense why we would continue teaming these two up. So that's a great start there. Jonah makes a little bit of an appearance, nothing too much. May is there mostly to be like, hey, what's wrong? And that's not too much. His fellow students, I mean, they're kind of there to continue the mocking of Peter Parker, contrasting that with Spider-Man. That's it for that. So we'll move on from there. We'll go to Amazing Spider-Man number 4. This was released on June 11th, 1963. The story is Nothing Can Stop the Sandman, written by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, penciled by Steve Ditko, inked by Steve Ditko, lettered by Sam Rosen, and edited by Stan Lee. What else was going on in Marvel this month? Well, once again, we're still being released monthly, so we skip ahead to Journey into Mystery 95, where Thor must fight an android duplicate of himself and a scientist who designed that duplicate. Then in Tales to Astonish 47, we get a Tales to Astonish, where Ant-Man and the Wasp face the musical hypnotist Trago in what is really another forgettable story. Not everything's a winner back in the day. But speaking of winners, we go from there to Fantastic Four 18, where the Skrulls return for revenge and manage to duplicate the powers of the Fantastic Four by creating the Super Skrull, a character who will last to this present day as one of the best alien characters they have. Someone that Spider-Man will fight, I think, for the first time in Marvel Team Up. That sounds right. Then, of course, we get Strange Tales 112, where the Human Torch works to defeat the Eel when he steals the mysterious Project X. Not the greatest villain in the world, not the worst ever created. One of yet another mini villains made in Strange Tales that would eventually go on to do other things in a Marvel universe. Another villain we see who does things later on in the Marvel Universe is introduced in Tales of Suspense 45, where Iron Man is beset by the menace of Jack Frost, later renamed to the First Blizzard, in a much better story compared to Strange Tales. And speaking of Strange Tales, Annual number 2 is also released here, which is why we'll be discussing this after we do Amazing Spider-Man number 4. So let us head that way, where we see him on the cover facing off against this guy in a iconic now, but not then, green shirt and denim pants. And he kind of contracts a bit when Spider-Man tries to go after him, and then turns into sand. And we get that classic pose of him trapping Spider-Man while half of his body is sand. The other half that is able to talk to him is still looking humanoid. See, this is why he's called the Sandman. So moving on, we didn't see Peter and Spider-Man as Spider-Man going around the city. There's a board up of the Spider-Man Menace, a new series by J. Jonah Jameson, starting today in the Daily Bugle. And of course, he's very upset at that. But he sees what looks like some people casing a jewelry store. He goes after them and he webs them up. And unfortunately, they haven't done anything yet. So while it is really apparent that they are about to do what he thinks they're about to do, they haven't done the crime. So they actually call out for the police because, there's still a bounty out for Spidey's head and he's seen as a menace. And, the policeman says, hey, it reasonably so, given a situation, hey, come here and file a report with me. But Peter, being Peter at this stage in his life, he's not going to do the right thing and explain himself and help him understand. You should probably be watching out for these guys because they're about to rob the place. And then he goes off and flees. And even the police officer's like, yeah, I think he probably knew what you people were doing, but I can't arrest you. This is not Minority Report. We can't arrest you for something you haven't done yet. Or very worse off is Civil War II in one of the worst crossovers ever in Marvel. So he gets very angry at the picture of Jonah, and he's going to go visit him as Spider-Man. But unfortunately, he's not there. So he leaves a little souvenir for him to prove that he was there. And as he does so, he sees some police cars chasing someone, sees this guy going up on a roof, figures it out by, pretty much what's going on. Oh, that's probably who they're looking for. Puts the spider signal up and sees the man, asks him who he is, and the man tells him that he is the Sandman, who Spider-Man has heard of. But he thought the reports were just a gag because we can have all these things, all these fantastical things. But of course, a man made out of sand. I mean, that's just ridiculous, obviously. So Spider-Man tries to take him out as he's like, hey, I'm going to go rob a couple of banks. So, well, you're obviously a bad dude. And having not learned his lesson of, stopping someone before they commit a crime, even though technically he does have a little more authority here in that he's an escaped convict, Spider-Man attacks him, actually punches through him, which is incredible because, once again, Peter normally holds back a lot given his super strength. So to see him go through the sand is messing with him. And even when he goes to give him a punch, Sandman is able to change the density of his jaw to where it feels like iron. And he makes Peter makes the analogy of how he's kind of like Mr. Fantastic and how he's able to do things, only he's not on our side. And in a fight, Peter's mask is torn off, and afraid that his secret identity will be exposed, he goes through all these things about, even if he does capture the Sandman, now he can tell him, who he is. And J. Jonah Jameson will call for him to be locked up for life. He doesn't want decent teenagers to associate with him. He's just an overgrown delinquent. And he sees himself behind bars, and Aunt May kind of going around selling shoelaces for 10 cents because she can't afford anything now that he's in jail. And he runs away because he's afraid of what can happen. And, some of this is rational and reasonable. And the rest of it is the Sandman allowing himself to get away through this to go and take down a bank, because with his sand powers, he's able to slip through any defenses that they have. And Peter is then having to sew a new mask for himself. And he even brings up, hey, I'm not really a seamstress. I mean, I made this, but he can't go out and ask someone to do it for him. So this takes some work and precision and hands that I don't have. So more power to him. He sees a news report of the Sandman, and we get some exposition on the Sandman's backstory. He was once an inmate at Island Prison. Flint Marco is his name. A very incorrigible person. He escaped through an unguarded drainage tunnel, and he never wanted to be caught alive again. And ended up at an atomic devices testing center because, once again, what does radiation do? It gives you superpowers. Even though there's a danger keep out sign in the blast, he was mixed in kind of with the sand around him. His molecules were changed, and he became a little radioactive and virtually indestructible. And as this is continuing to go on, Peter hears Aunt May coming on, so he has to get out of his costume fast, gets into a robe and kind of fakes illness and a fever, which is a little hot because he's very scared and upset. So it feels like he has a fever to Aunt May. So she's going to go and take care of him, tells him to get to bed. She's going to bring up aspirin and thermometer for him because, she's a caring, kind woman who does love her nephew very much. And he goes back, listens to the news broadcast, and thinks about how he could possibly have stopped him as Spider-Man, but you can't do that because Aunt May's taking care of him because she doesn't know he's Spider-Man. Which, yeah, I understand I'm not doing it now, but definitely doing it later on would have been much more reasonable. Because, what's more responsible than telling someone you love what you're doing? But, whatever. What do I know? And then the next morning, we see that he is normal now. She's going to fix him a warm breakfast so he can go off to school. Hey, he's finally finished the mask. I'm sorry. And he is going off to go see J. Jonah Jameson about something, and she calls him, that nice gentleman who publishes the Daily Bugle and Now Magazine. Which, by the way, we are officially confirmed. I should have said that last time for Daily Bugle instead of just being Now Magazine. Now Magazine will be part of J. Jonah Jameson's stuff when people remember it exists. But from now on, we're primarily going to hear Daily Bugle. and she goes off to help him, gives him an umbrella. It might rain today. J. Jonah Jameson, meanwhile, is worried about, the little latest bulletins about the Sandman. He also wants that file on Spider-Man. He gets down to his desk, sits down, and what happens? Well, he sits in the webbing that Spider-Man left behind, even though Spider-Man's webbing dissolves in an hour. This must have been the tougher stuff. They're not thinking about that. And this is when Peter meets Miss Brent, who has talked to J. Jonah Jameson about how angry he is about what the situation going on. Kind of talks to Peter about bringing him a new pair of pants, which he does. He now has the audacity to ask if Jameson gave an advance on his next check. And Jameson goes off on him on a whole tirade. An advance? Are you kidding? What do you do with money? Eat it? Look, this is a business, not a charity. When you bring me exclusive pictures, I pay for them, but not before. Which, yeah, he's angry and a jerk about it. But he's right. He's not wrong. And Peter's thinking to himself, well, he needed the money for new experiments with his webbing to try and take down Sandman, but he can't tell him that. He attempted it. He tried it, and as we all know, as the great sage Chip Ashley has often said to me, tries just a three-letter word for failure. So moving on, he goes to school. And, earlier he had attempted to have a date with Liz, and unfortunately he's going to have to not go through with it. And Flash is very angry. It's like, well, you should probably just go with me instead. And Liz is upset and dejected because she's the one giving him a chance, by the way, in this scenario. And he can't even, do the simple thing of actually going out on a date with her. By the way, stepping up in the world and how they view things, in the high school way. And it's got Peter all upset because he had his opportunity, but once again, his life with Spider-Man is interfering with his life as Peter Parker. Sandman, we see him in very creative ways getting away from the police, and he ends up near Peter Parker's high school. And he says, well, what's one place no one would ever think to look for me? The high school. Which, for a dumb crook, he's not wrong. Why would they ever think he'd go there? There's nothing to steal. It's just a place from the lie low. We then, of course, get Chekhov's vacuum cleaner, where Peter Parker is delivering old bottles to the boiler room. Talks to the janitor there. Thinks about how the janitor's life is much better than his because, all he has to worry about is keeping the school clean. As someone who has been a janitor before, it is a very stressful job. So, yeah, it's all about perspective. And Peter Parker doesn't have that because he's young. And you know what? That's perfectly fine. The Sandman then goes and finds the principal there and kind of has this realization, you know what? I never graduated school. So give me a diploma. And the principal's like, look, like, you can threaten me all you want, but like, I can't give you something you haven't earned. And like, even the kids are like, man, principal's kind of cool. Yeah, a teacher here, a principal here is kind of cool. A man with guts. And Sandman threatens him, and he kind of the principal tells everyone to flee. He's like getting in front of them, being a good administrator, a good leader. And that's when Spider-Man comes in to take out the Sandman, actually punches him because he's not ready. Everyone's cheering him on, and he's like thinking to himself, if they only knew that it was puny Peter Parker that they were cheering for. Oh man, the classic irony of all. He and Sandman didn't fight one another. He didn't get Sandman away from everyone that tells him to get out. He goes to get to a place where he can work a little better to get around everything. Webs Sandman up, but fortunately he can go through the little holes in the webbing. Fights Sandman. Sandman headbutts him in the head real easily. But Spider-Man, learning from prior experience, does what he wouldn't do to a normal criminal and bashes Sandman's head against the stairwell to where his head is beaten up and explodes, but like he's still alive. It's just going to take a little while for everything to connect back together. He doesn't know how long it works, but eventually the sand is brought back into the form of Sandman. He continues to fight him, and Sandman actually surrounds him and encases him in this ball of sand, goes down the steps to the basement, where Spider-Man then brings up an electric drill, to attack him. That doesn't work at all. But this is a diversion to where he then uses the vacuum, Chekhov's vacuum, to suck the Sandman up. Spider-Man has taken him out, but then he realizes, oh, I never took any pictures. So I'm going to do a questionably ethical thing here. And he brings some of the sand that's there, pour on fires and stuff, tosses it in the air, and takes pictures of himself in a false fight with sand that isn't Sandman. Wrong? Ethical? Well, I'll leave that up to you, because I kind of think, like, all things considered, I understand. Then we, of course, have J. Jonah Jameson talking to the police, who have cordoned off the area, demanding why they haven't gone to take down and overpower the Sandman. They're waiting until all the students are out, because they actually do their job, as opposed to certain other people, when there are moments when the police don't do their job in situations where there are potential bad people in schools, shall we say. Not to get too political in that matter, but it's nice to idealize these things, because that's what people are supposed to do. Then, of course, we get the spider signal with Spider-Man having captured Sandman and bringing him to the police. He goes to explain it, and then he thinks about, wait, if I do, what if they find out who I am? They will lock me up too. And he decides to just leave Sandman there, because Peter Parker, young teenager, is not thinking correctly and is not thinking about everything else. Goes to switch back to Peter Parker, and then gives him J. Jonah Jameson the photos that he developed of what happened there. Jameson is upset that Spider-Man hasn't been caught, but everything's turned out okay. Peter's going to get paid. He can take Liz out on that date, and he then asks her for it, and she, very upset, and rightly so, says that she's going to be busy that night. She's made with Flash, really, and Peter is upset because he could fight Flash right now, and he could easily pulverize him, but is he really supposed to do that? Is that how he's going to handle his problems? So he gives up on it and then walks away. Liz tells him that he has no courage, and she and Flash and their friends go off together. But even though, to her credit, she does tell Flash, hey, don't be so cruel to Peter. And Flash, of course, being a young teenager, doesn't understand that you can feel two things at the same time. You can be upset at someone and still like them, and it's wondering why I thought she was just mad at him. And I get it. Like, we've all been that stupid lunkhead at one point in time. We didn't see, people talking about Spider-Man taking down the Sandman, whether or not you can trust J. Jonah Jameson, whether he's better than the Human Torch, whether he's just crazy, and Peter is just left to himself. Like, can they be right? Am I really some sort of a crackpot, wasting my time seeking fame and glory? Am I more interested in the adventure of being Spider-Man than I am in helping people? Why do I do it? Why don't I give the whole thing up? And yet I can't. I must have been given this great power for a reason. No matter how difficult it is, I must remain as Spider-Man, and I pray that someday the world will understand. And that is a great way to end this story. Not the greatest story in the world, but a great way to end it. So let's go through it. Sandman as villain. This is an effective enough beginning for the character. Sandman is a character, how to put this, Marvel has neglected over the years. And I'm not happy with them and how, because Sandman is like your dumb thug who got these powers by happenstance and uses them to rob banks instead of helping other people or making a living out of it that any other person would have done. He ends up joining the Frightful Four, becoming an enemy of the Fantastic Four, alongside being an enemy of Spider-Man. But then along the way, starts to reform. Built off, of Marvel Team Up #1, Spider-Man and the Human Torch take him down, revealing he was trying to get something for his older mother, if I remember correctly, either mother or grandmother. It's been a while since I've read it. And it shows a little softer side of him to why he would do some of his criminal actions. Then we go later on into the Marvel 2-in-1 kind of stuff, where the Thing kind of gets a camaraderie with him to the point where there's a nice moment later on where I'm pretty sure the Thing is in the hospital and Sandman comes and like talks to him and they have fun together. And then later on from there, Sandman ended up becoming, at the same time as Spider-Man, a reserve Avenger. Sorry to spoil things that have happened 30 years ago from this point, but this is a great, progression of a character. And then what happens? The Wizard comes and brainwashes Sandman to become a villain again. And there's no attempt by Spider-Man to help him out of this situation. What would happen for any other hero? He's just stuck as a villain because we need the Sandman as a villain because I grew up with the Sandman as a villain, so he should be a villain. Much in the same way as I grew up with a Peter Parker who was single, or I grew up with a Peter Parker who was dating Gwen Stacy, and she's the real love of his life, which has no actual bearing when you actually read the comics, which we'll get there when we get there. There's people focusing on the wrong parts of nostalgia and ruining a character like Sandman, who could be a lot better right now. Like, who could have been an actual member of a team like the Avengers, or was respected by Spider-Man, where he joined other little outcasts like Rocket Racer and the Prowler and Puma to have the pseudo team. They'd come together. He was a part of the Silver Sable and the Wild Pack for a bit. So for right here and now, Sandman as villain works perfectly fine. He's not the greatest in the world. He's not the most imaginative. What? No, I strike that from the record. I think he is really imaginative. And the fact that sand-based powers, it forces Spider-Man to think. He can't just punch his way out of the problem. He has to use his scientific skills to take things down. Yeah, I was being stupid when I said that. But something I also appreciate here is kind of the schools to setting for this part of Peter Parker's history. Let me make that clear. Because he needs to grow up. But for right here and now, this works perfectly fine. We've got a young man who's out in the world where he doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't understand how to talk about his feelings well. He doesn't understand how to talk to women well. And he wants something. He wants, to have this date with Liz. And it's not working out because of his Spider-Man life interfering with everything. And she's upset because she obviously doesn't know why he'd give up a date with her after giving a chance to him as someone who's outcast by everyone else practically. And yet it just doesn't work out. And there's a nice bit of that drama there that works really well in the story that wouldn't happen if Peter Parker were an adult. Because you can have misunderstandings between romantic couples, but it gets dumber when it's not high schoolers or teenagers, as it were. Because your hope is that adults are a little more mature. So even though Liz shows signs of maturity here that the boys obviously aren't, and that she's still protective of Peter, even though she's upset with him. That's somewhere I was going with that, and I completely forgot it. But the point being, this is great. The supporting cast is growing here in Spider-Man. And unfortunately, as the years go by, a lot of people don't know what to do with them, to the point that Liz now is like the owner of what is. I think they did change the name to Alchemax from our 2099 fans out there. And then it's all a mess with the symbiotes and her relationship with Harry. I'm fine with the Harry part, her being in a relationship with him, but it just gets nonsensical as time goes on because, comics don't have an ending. Well, speaking of something that's going to bring us to an ending day, we're going to talk about Strange Tales Annual 2. This is released June 11th, 1963, On the Trail of the Amazing Spider-Man is the story title, written by Stan Lee, penciled by Jack Kirby, inked by Steve Ditko. Is that correct? Did I write that down? I guess so. Stan Goldberg colored it and lettered by Artie Simek. Also edited by Stan Lee. So, going into the issue proper, we see not the greatest cover in the world. Spider-Man facing off a Human Torch. It does its job. What more do you want? We see Johnny training along with Sue, and how he can use his fire powers in one way. He can even use flame to fit like a lock. So we just like a key inside of a lock, which is, classic 60s Marvel nonsense, but sure, let's say that can work. And he's reading Live magazine, where it's devoted to that swell-headed, that's big. They have a big head. for those of us not in the 60s, a Spider-Man, and he's getting upset how Spider-Man can get more headlines than him, and Sue's like, "You're just being an idiot." Like, he's going to continue that childish tantrum. She's just going to fade away, go invisible. And he makes a joke about how she wouldn't be so calm if there was a Spider Girl out there stealing her thunder, which of course we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 50 of those now these days for exaggeration purposes. So he's tired of everyone just talking about Spider-Man. So he's going to go and do something. He'll give anything for a chance to prove that he's not so hot, and yet the Human Torch is hot. Then we get the Fox, who is our villain here, our okay villain, I guess, who's going to steal some artwork, takes off the lights, then does his job with his goons, and then falsifies evidence that Spider-Man is the one who did it, because they left the giant spider's web around. So obviously that must be Spider-Man doing it. This, of course, is not taken down well by the real Spider-Man, who's like, how am I supposed to prove that I didn't do it because I didn't steal it? So he can't even let the police catch sight of him. He's going to, says, even I could use some help here. So what I'm going to do, well, the Human Torch lives nearby in Glenville because we all know his secret identity, even though he tried to keep it a secret identity because he's an idiot. And he goes, and instead of web swinging around, since it's not going to be very viable, he hitches onto a passing train, ends up at Glenville, and goes to the house where Johnny lives, where he's leaving with Sue is about to leave. And he's gotten something on the phone about how Spider-Man has done something villainous, and he's happy to help the police find him. Then he sees Spider-Man's outline and goes after him and attacks him. And Spider-Man's like, "Hey, I just want to talk to you." But of course, we kind of let you and him fight. And this is, they've had their brief little fight in Amazing Spider-Man 1. This is a lot better this time around. Gives them both a way to showcase their powers. Spider-Man gets into the pool outside. Human Torch tries to heat it up. Spider-Man makes a water ball out of it and then douses the Human Torch with it. Attacks him. He then makes some fire images of himself so he can attack on multiple fronts with Spider-Man. But he's too fast where even all of them together can't do anything. And Spider-Man runs away, realizes that the Torch must have found out about the police wanting him for the theft, and he then goes away to a construction site, messes with the cement there to then take down the Human Torch temporarily in cement casing. He's able to then bring himself out of it by baking the cement to where it burns off, and he took a lot out of him, so he's going to go and rest for a bit. Spider-Man then flees. The Human Torch goes after him. Spider-Man is able to avoid him, and he ends up at the Carson Chemical Laboratories, where he's decided that he's going to make a type of webbing that's going to add ice cold silicone crystals to make a webbing that can take the torch down. That sounds good enough for me. So sure. It's also something, it could douse the torch's flame, but strong enough to withstand a hammer blow. The police are talking to Johnny about taking out Spider-Man. A spider signal shows up, and they often it says some very boastful things to the torch. Then flames on, goes to attack Spider-Man. They then web swing and fly out of that area. Spider-Man is able to attack him, and then webs him up with the special webbing. And it says, "Hey, all right, you've had your fun. Give your tonsils a rest." It's a very funny line. And listen to me, will you? And it talks about how he was framed, and the vapors are messing with Johnny, taking his flames out. And Peter tells him, "Look, hey, you thought you would get a kick out of this, working with me to help find the real thief and prove that they were wrong and that you're willing to work with me." But he tells he's made a mistake, so he goes off. And Johnny actually learns his lesson, tells the police to call to search for Spider-Man, and then finds from the police officer there that it's actually this guy called Reynard Slinker. Reynard, of course, being a fox in European mythology, folklore. Renard, sorry, who is behind all this stuff, and Human Torch then leaves a message in the air for the first time, something that will happen later on. Spider-Man, let's work together. The Fox, of course, hears this, gets upset. Then Spider-Man goes to the Statue of Liberty and puts his spider signal there for Johnny to see, establishing for the first time this happening. This is where the two of them, from here on out, will continue to meet with one another. You know, when they want to talk about life, when they're curious about something, or when they're about to go team up. Something that I'm glad a lot of people remember, because I'm a continuity nut, and I love when people remember things like this. So they talk things out, and they decide they're going to go and take down the Fox. And as they do, they find this apparently old woman who leaves him with a bag while she's going to go get her subway tokens. But unfortunately, it's some sort of super glue. This is one of the guys. The Fox and his goons are there. They're able to then take him down. Not take him down. They are able to follow him as a train goes by. And as they do that, his spider sense, because this once again still early on, is able to detect exactly where they need to go. Underneath, a wooden Native American, they're able to find the secret lair of the Fox, web up a couple of his bad guys, and then together they then find him in the park, where he's got a gadget that looks like a telescope to look at the moon and stuff. That's part of his scheme, but he tries to get away on his little rocket boot skates, as it were. But he is no match for Spider-Man and the Human Torch, who capture him. Find that inside of the telescope was the painting that was stolen, the Da Vinci painting. They take the Fox off to the authorities, and we end off with, "You were some help, Torch. I needed you like a hole in the head. In your case, kiddo, a hole in the head would be an improvement. And the Fox, our great villain here, come on, lock me up so I can stop listening to you two nuts. Yuck, yuck, yuck." The end. And this is also, I think, when we get the announcement that Spider-Man is going to be monthly from here on out in this issue. So, yeah, that is pretty much it. We get some backup stories here in Strange Tales Annual number 2. Nothing that really concerns us. So we're just going to go forward and just talk about the issue in question. So let's start with a high note. Peter and Johnny's friendship and how it starts here. One of the longest lasting friendships in Marvel history. And it's so good. Because as mentioned earlier, you've got two people who are diametrically opposed to each other. They're both rash youths who make stupid decisions, but one is an idiot and the other is emotionally immature too. But also a genius. Like, both of them are emotionally immature because, they're kids. That's part of who they are. And if you are a teenager listening to this, sorry, I hate to tell you, I was there too at one point in time. But what makes it work well is that these hotheads, one literal, end up actually working well together because they recognize they're both good people. They're both working to help other people and do good in this world. And yeah, it's going to be a very long time before Peter reveals his secret identity to Johnny. And that's more a strike against the writers than I think it is against Peter. Because I think he would have revealed it, not immediately, but fairly soon after this. Once they, spent more time together as friends. But it's something that lasts, because there's also a fun part where Johnny will know Peter Parker and has met Peter Parker before, as established in issue 3. But he's going to have issues with him, but also beef with Spider-Man at the same time. So there's some fun dualistic things there. But what this helps start, even though it was kind of started in issue 1, is Spider-Man's relationship with the Fantastic Four. And I got to say, that's some of my favorite parts of the comics. As someone who loves crossovers, who loves people teaming up with one another, is when you establish a relationship with them. Because, yeah, you can just have a team-up issue whenever you want. But there's something big and bold about it actually meaning something, about growing together as people. With Spider-Man actually becoming a member of the Fantastic Four later on because of his prior relationship with them, because of their love for one another, to the point where it's Johnny, after his supposed death in 587 there-ish, asking in his not obituary, his final message for Spider-Man to take his place because he trusts Peter to look after everyone there because he is family. And it means a lot, and it starts here in this rather mediocre issue. Let me get that out of the way. And it kind of got me thinking about that. Is mediocrity something we should just expect in comics at time and just be grateful that we got what we got? And I'm of two minds of this because, yeah, this is never going to enter like my top 1,000 comics ever, or even beyond that. I could go 2,000. But it's the starting point for something that becomes very important. And without this, we don't get what happens later on. So normally it'd be like, this is not worth your time. Don't read it. But there's also that part of me that says, no, this is worth your time reading it. If you want to go on beyond what I've said about it, because I went more to breakneck pace, for time's sake. And go out and experience it because this is Marvel history. Without what happens here, we don't have to the same extent what happens later on. So I think at the end of the day, I kind of answer this question as yes, it kind of sucks compared to other things, but just because it does suck doesn't mean it's not valuable. So there is worth in something like this. It's not like let's just go with the nuclear option. It's not like a One More Day where there's nothing of value in that entire story because it's the whining ramblings of Spider-Man fans, allegedly, who just want Peter Parker to be who they want him to be versus who he actually ended up becoming as a character. So, yeah, there are redeeming values to this. So it's worth your time checking out. So we got through 3 issues. Next time, if I'm remembering correctly, we will be doing Amazing Spider-Man number 5, number 6, and just number 5 and number 6. So thank you all for what you do. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please leave a like, comment down below, share this with other people. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice. Not just Apple Podcasts, any podcasts is what I meant to say. As well, continue to share the show with friends and family that way. And remember, with great podcast, there must also come great responsibility.